Yeah, we have a question here, Mark.
Okay, great.
Mark, I hope you don't mind. I actually have two questions.
Great.
The first question is, you mentioned the non-manufacturers rule and recognizing that, small businesses are not manufacturers, so even though they're resellers, that rule still applies. What is the policy behind having that in place? Because we've actually come across that quite several times. We've seen it inconsistently applied. We've tried to explain it to the contracting officer, saying, we've seen it done one way where it doesn't apply. We've seen it done another way. And I'm assuming that the rule is there so that small businesses aren't being used as kind of like a shell or a bypass for larger manufacturers. But knowing the resellers out there, and that presents an issue, is there some sort of resolution or something in writing that we can provide?
Yeah, so let me take that in a couple steps because that's an excellent question. So the non-manufacturer rule was put in place by SBA, and it is intended to protect small businesses, to make sure that if you're getting a set-aside award, that it's not being funneled to large business. So it's certainly a protection in there. So it does apply when you're doing set-aside task orders that the small business should be the manufacturer. Given that, we do have a lot of resellers on schedule, so there is a way to reach small businesses through using the evaluation factors. So that's something that it has to be a business judgment decision on the part of the contracting officer. The other thing I will mention about it is also SBA does have a waiver process for the small business to the non-manufacturer rule, and so we implemented the set-aside authority under the schedules program really quickly, but that is something that we're having an ongoing dialogue with SBA, and there will be potential. I would see there's potential in the future for some waivers and to have that discussion with SBA. The other thing I just want to point out for all those people that follow policy trends out there, I mentioned that there was an interim FAR case on this, and we've been working very closely with the folks in Office of Federal Procurement Policy and the Small Business Administration, and there was an SBA proposed rule that got published in the Federal Register today that implements this a little bit further and gives some details on it. It's a proposed rule, so it's out for public comment, so anybody that wants to publicly comment on it, but it talks about a little bit more about some new rules around size determination, a little bit clarity about the discretionary authority and some documentation requirements for the contracting officers, and gets into some other issues. So I encourage you all, take a look at that proposed rule, and it's open for public comment, so I do encourage people to comment on that publicly.
My second question is, with the small business set-asides under GSA, our company has we're a contract holder under IT Schedule 70. And one of the difficulties we come across is that we have to obtain letter of supplies from our manufacturers before we can resell the product on GSA. And some manufacturers have a very limited amount of letter of supplies where they'll issue it only to their quote-unquote large small businesses or large businesses. So in the end, even though there might be opportunities that are set aside, in IT Schedule 70, the reality is only really a handful of the resellers that can get the letter of supply can compete for that. Has that been brought up to GSA?
This is a good opportunity to clarify some of the rules around a letter of supply. So, I mean, really what the threshold and what the contracting officer, the scheduled contracting officer should be looking at is, do you have a sufficient source of supply? And they need some kind of evidence that says if you're going to get an order from a customer that you're going to be able to fill that order because you're not the manufacturer of it, you're a reseller. That evidence doesn't necessarily have to take the form of a letter of supply. So if you can provide other evidence to the contracting officer that says, hey, I have the capability to provide these goods and services, and if I get a delivery order for that product under the schedule, I can provide it, that should be ample evidence to the contracting officer that that you have a sufficient support source of supply. So if you do have specific issues, feel free to talk to me after. I'm going to hang out with you guys as long as I can. But that is our policy stance on that, and so there's no hard requirement that you have a letter of supply, but just evidence that you can provide that product and fill orders generally.
Yeah, I've got some very specific questions on the non-manufacturer rule. We were just awarded a BPA, and we are a small business, and they really stress the non-manufacturer rule. Do I go to SBA or GSA to get answers to, I mean, a lot of questions on the non-manufacturer rule?
Okay, was the BPA, was that a set-aside BPA?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the non-manufacturer rule applies, so the small business has to be the manufacturer of the item. I would say if you have really detailed questions about the non-manufacturer rule, I would refer you to the Small Business Administration. They are the ones that set the small business contracting policies. And just so you know how the process generally works is SBA has their own set of regulations, and it's Chapter 13 in the Code of Federal Regulations. And when they publish a rule, what actually happens is we take that SBA regulation and we translated that into the Federal Acquisition Regulation into Part 19. So that's why I say if you go to SBA, they are the subject matter experts on those policies. They set it. And so I would refer you to talk to them about those specifics.
Give me suggestions. Who do I should talk to in SBA?
You should speak with the Office of Government-Wide Contracting in SBA. So I can give you a point of contact after the session here. If you come up to me, I'll give you a direct point of contact with SBA.
Okay, thank you. More of a comment, really, I guess. President Obama says he wants more small business. Everybody says he wants more business, yet the trend seems to be to more strategic sourcing, bigger companies that really seem to do away with small business, or to combine projects into very, very large projects, which really only apply to the bigger businesses. And it seems like you're really going counter to small business with a lot of those efforts. I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yes, I can, because we definitely have a goal to increase small business utilization in federal procurement process. And so we have, at the same time, we have these federal strategic sourcing initiatives going on that are looking to achieve savings, but those goals are not divergent. So, part of our pillars in terms of the federal strategic sourcing initiative is ensuring that we do have small business utilization in those opportunities. So, when GSA has set up some of those blanket purchase agreements, we've worked collaboratively with, we've established work groups with federal agencies where we collectively across the government define our requirements, and we develop an acquisition strategy together. And one of those main components of that acquisition strategy is making sure that we do achieve small business utilization. So, that is a primary focus of those strategic sourcing initiatives, and something that we look very closely at and consider very carefully when going forward with those procurements.